Hi, everyone. Great to see you. This is the webinar for personal engagement power, how to engage others without changing who you are. And I ran this webinar yesterday for a group. There were 40 of us on the call. And as a result, we, talked about, private things, and did some group work. And so as a result, it wasn't really suitable to share that recording. So I'm doing this recording for those of you who missed it, and also those of you who'd like a recap. And to be honest, even those who attended, I think that I might do a better job of covering the concept now because there was a lot of us yesterday, so it was pretty busy. Let me begin by saying this is a preview of what will be what is a 3-week program that starts next Wednesday, the 8th of July. So this lays out the concept, and then what we will be looking at is the overall idea, and then I will be sharing how you can be involved in actually the work that we're going to do to go along this journey. So let's kick this off. We're talking about engagement, engaging other people, whether that's colleagues at work, that boss that you struggle with, people across the organization. Might be that you're looking to engage people online. It might be that you have people that are working in different organizations, clients. It might be that you feel you constantly show up in a room and you're just not quite being who you are. Maybe you feel like you have to perform as someone else. All of these situations, what we're looking at here is how to engage people. And I think it's quite helpful to recognize what is engagement. Engagement, quite simply, is when you and me come together and you and me creates we. Really, really simple concept. And what we're looking at is how do we create we's with people where we are honestly us in that relationship and honestly us in that moment, as opposed to it being a we where we're actually not quite being ourselves and we're not getting the engagement that we would like. And I like to say that engagement is organizational relationship building. You can see here, we've got this kind of whole journey of inside to outside, because engagement is how do we build relationships? And we can look at it, right? How do we build relationships with communities? How do we build relationships with teams, with customers? But all of this is based upon fundamentally, how do we build relationships with individuals? And also, how do we bring ourselves into those relationships? So everything comes back to this simple process of how do we create a we? How do we do this whilst also being us in that we, as opposed to someone else? And this is the engagement struggle, right? Is how do we go from being you and them, right, us and them, to being a we? What's the way that we can go about doing that? And one of the attitudes, one of the perspectives is to say, well, the only way that I could possibly achieve that, right, was if I was to just move my screens here, was if I was to kind of, reach out with all this energy onto the other person. And many of us, we are told, we need to be more forceful. Maybe you've been told that. You need to be bolder. You need to say what you want. You need to be stronger. Certainly, I see a lot of stuff out there, that kind of says you need to, be more forceful. But what if that's not you? Right? And then I don't know if you've experienced this, I have, right, where I try to kind of chase them and then they kind of move even further away. There's this great comedian called Catherine Tate. Well, this comedian called Catherine Tate, and she had this character who was like, "Am I bothered though?" And it almost feels like you're trying to engage people, and they're like, "Yeah, but am I bothered?" You feel like they're just going to run away from you. Uh, so then, what we do, right? Tell me if this mirrors what you've done. Is we tried it. We go, "Oh, I need to be bigger." Right? So we're going to try all these ways that we can be bigger and engage people more forcefully. And we get told this a lot, right? Take up more space in the room, be a bigger character, be stronger, be louder. Heck, this is where you should sit in the room. This is what you should say, and all of this stuff. Be the first to reply to an email. No, no, no. Be the last to reply to an email. And all of it is around fundamentally, how do I become bigger? And it gets ridiculous because you kind of get some advice that is almost like suggesting that we just become so big that we swallow people up into us. And again, that's just not who I want to be. I don't want to engage people like that. Um, the worst situation, though, I think, is when we ourselves feel diminished, right? That we're trying to engage someone else and their energy is just huge. I have a lot of people that I connect with where they are trying to engage someone and that other person just feels somewhat impenetrable. It's almost like they're spiky. You can kind of put spikes on this. They just feel like someone I can't quite engage with. And no matter what I do, I'm just not getting through. The solution to all of this, apparently, from what you will see online, is stuff like, wow, you need executive presence. Or, you need to stop being boring. You need to learn the influence methods. You need to break the script, right? You need to do some hacks and stuff. And we need behavioral economics. Like I said, choose the best seat in any meeting, right? How can we sit in the right place? How do we become more magnetic, right? How do I create all these hooks and latches and all of this? Heck, even we're told, stop being yourself, which just seems really sad. And I don't know, I don't think that's the way forward. I'd like to clear all that away. And I'd like to suggest to you that engagement is actually a really natural and common thing. It's happening all the time. You walk down the street, people are engaging with you, people are engaging as you stand in a line, people are engaging at the shops. And when we're not engaging, it's generally because there's a reason why it perhaps isn't suitable for us to engage right now. But engagement is actually frightfully common. It's every day. It's happening at work all the time. And I do believe there is a way of engaging others without changing who you are, without you needing to feel like you need to be someone else. Like right now, for instance, I'm, I can see myself, I can see my slides, all of this stuff, and I'm wondering, am I coming across as the right person? Am I being me? You know what? Just sod it. Let me be me, right? And I will get better over time with some methods, but let me not spend time agonizing, right? And these are the frustrations. And I'd like to say there is a way. There is a way that we can engage people whose energy we find difficult without acting in a way that frustrates you. You know, those people when you don't even know what to say to them, or then you engage with them, and then afterwards you're like, why did I act like that? And maybe you kind of get into like a parent child thing going on, or you become irritable or whatever, right? But we can engage people that are difficult being ourselves, right? We can. This is something that came up in the webinar yesterday. We can be ourselves as a relational person in a task focused environment. Someone was saying that they're in a job that was very relational. They got taken over. Now the company is more task focused. It is possible for them to be themselves still in that organization. I don't believe that we now need to and they shouldn't need to have to go and change everything about themselves, right? There is a way. It's possible to make contribution without worrying if others respect you. Like right now, I'm just choosing, I'm not going to worry if you respect me. I'm not going to share what I have to say, right? There is a way of doing that. But for those of us who've been there, and maybe you have, it is tormenting to constantly be wondering, do they respect me? Am I coming across right? There is a way of asking for help, for the help that you need, without feeling like it makes you weak. Like totally, we can ask for help and it not make us weak. I mean, there are a lot of people out there, and I know, I can think of some friends right now that they just would never imagine that asking for help would make you feel weak. But for some of us, that might be the way that we are thinking or coming at this. There is a way of not constantly second guessing yourself about how you come across. Geez, there was this guy yesterday on the call, and he says, people are always telling me I come across too loud. I mean, that's horrible. Right? He's constantly having to evaluate himself. There is a way, right, of engaging without constantly evaluating. I think we can learn that. And there is a way to have relational capital with people and be yourself. Right? It is possible to have relational capital, to be influential, to be well connected, and to be yourself. You don't need to be some slimy networker. You don't need to be some Machiavellian politician who's got everyone in your pocket. There is a way. What is this way? Right? What is this way? This way, I believe, and I'd like to share with you, is a gravity approach, a gravitational approach to engagement, right? Because normally what we're doing is we're going, how do I reach out to these people? How do I kind of like loop them in and drag them somehow into my sphere? And actually, we all know this about gravity. The way that gravity works, right, is your mass, the mass of an object, creates, a dip in the fabric of space and time. And what this does is it moves things towards it. Literally, like it shapes mass and stuff moves towards it. And notice how things, right? This is, I think, what is the great thing is things draw others to them based upon their mass, not necessarily their size, not necessarily their weight, which is based on other things, but their mass, as in essentially who they are. I'd like to suggest that rather than trying to engage by like, how do I go out? Actually, maybe the direction is just, how do I go deeper? How do I become more of myself? How do I just let me be me and I draw people? And your mass is going to be a mix of things, right? Your mass is going to be your experiences. Like your experiences are naturally going to engage some people. Your skills, natural skills, your trained skills, your personality, whether you are more introverted, extroverted, whether you are more agreeable or less agreeable, those things are going to engage people. I mean, there are some people out there who are frightfully disagreeable, yet people love them. And there are people out there who are very agreeable and people love them. It's never ceases to fascinate me how you can be everything on the spectrum, right? But generally, it's the people that seem to own themselves. That seems to be the thing, right? They own their mass, they know their mass. Your mass will be determined by your geography. Like where I am in the world and my availability literally determines who engages me and who doesn't. So mass is the first thing that we need to work out. And we need to ultimately come to a place of owning our mass, owning who we are, owning the parts of us that make up who we are and the way that we arrive, right? So one of the things that happened to me yesterday was on the webinar that I hosted, there were 40 people. It was really busy. But part of what people tell me they like about what I do is the way I bring together people, and I knew everyone, I greeted everybody, I created a rich kind of communal space, and people told me they really liked that. Whereas others, that's not their style. They're more of a seminar lecturer person, and that's okay, right? Be you. The next thing, and again, I mean, I'm fudging physics a little bit here, but anything that's kind of got gravity has got some kind of gravitational field around it, right? Or we can think of magnets having a kind of field. And the field is the thing that does touch upon other objects. Like when other objects draw towards us, there is our field. And our field essentially is, how do we show up? How do we show up? So like right now, how am I showing up? Well, I'm using hand gestures and things. That's something that I know, something I've learned. I've shaped my background accordingly because these are some things that I've learned about engagement in terms of how to engage virtually. But again, some people will be different. Some people will choose a different way. And our field is going to be stuff like when we're in conversations with someone, what is our field? What are our patterns for engaging in the moment? So mass is who we are. Field is how do we engage in the moment? And I'd like to suggest, and I found this helpful myself, is that it helps for us to know our mass and then also to develop some ways that we manifest our field, ways that our field interacts with others. For instance, there is a way of asking for things. And if you can learn the way that you feel comfortable asking for things, you can then repeat that again and again and not be worried about how you come across when you ask for something, because you're doing it in a way that you feel comfortable with, right? And we've practiced that. There's a way of being in a meeting. There is a way of writing an email, and it's exhausting, right? When every time you do something, you're having to think about it afresh. So this really is about, how do I have a field that is just, I'm comfortable with the way I show up. So my kids will know that if I'm walking down the street and I pass someone who's asking for money or, homeless or something, I will probably always stop, say hello, and offer to buy them something. That's just part of the way I am. And I've decided I'm comfortable with that being part of who I am. Also, though, if someone comes up on the streets and they say we're raising money for something, I'm generally the person that will say, I'm sorry, I'm not going to do that. But I do that, right? This is my field and I'm comfortable with it. And it's the way I interact. When I greet people from a different country, I always speak their language first. That's part of the way that I like to do things. Others will do it differently, and that is all good, right? Sometimes we want someone who's going to be more formal, standing at the front of the room, let's say giving a lecture. We want someone who's going to be more forceful about decisions. I got to tell you, if it comes to making a decision, I'm not the guy you want. I'm not the best at making decisions, not the best at negotiating, not the best at disagreeing. So I'm comfortable with my field. Then the final thing with gravity, the final part of the framework, we go from mass, who we are, field, how we show up, and then finally it's orbit, right? This is the way that we are constantly having a rhythm of connection in our lives. If you know me, you will know that I have a system for staying in touch with people. I have a way of staying in touch with people that means I don't forget to be in touch with them. It means I can touch base with everyone who's significant for me and my business. And so that's something that I do. I get in touch with people on their birthdays when I know their birthdays. I have a way of staying in touch with clients. I have a way of staying in touch with friends. And this is an orbit for me. It's a natural rhythm. Many people, you need to engage a key stakeholder. Right? You need to engage somebody in another part of the organization. But if you don't have a rhythm of connection with them, a way of staying in touch, when it comes time for you to engage them, it's too late to build the influence. It's too late. You need to have already built the relationship in advance. So orbit is a really important thing. Another thing about orbit is Orbit is also saying, I'm going to keep doing this. So let's say this webinar right now, I did this yesterday. I did all right. I'm doing it again now. Literally the next day, I'm doing it again. And I will do this course and this program again and again, and I'll get better each time. And so the orbit, my rhythm of improvement is good because I can allow myself to be me now. I can allow myself to make mistakes because I know I'm going to be improving. And therefore I can inhabit this moment and not worry about how am I doing, because, well, I will maybe watch the recording. I will have a time to get better. I will refine. I know I have a rhythm, and that's really important. And then the tough thing about an orbit, and this I do find difficult, and I'm trying to actually undo it now, even by doing this program, is am I willing to be someone that others orbit around? And I've got issues with that because in my church background, I saw the way that people loved adoration and they loved people orbiting around them. And I don't like that. But there is a utility to being someone. And there is a way that we sometimes need to be someone that others can find some sense of orientation around. I mean, I'm a dad, my kids, of course, that's going to be a facet. But also, there are authors that I like who have provided for me some kind of central force that I could orbit around to gather something. So, do we have the willingness to be that person for our teams across the organization? Are we willing to step into that role, or are we hiding it? And we definitely will shy away from that when we're not comfortable with ourselves, with our mass, when we're not comfortable with our field. So, building an orbit is an important thing. So there are three things here, right, that we need to do. The first is to discover our mass, discover or define who we naturally are. Here's a challenge, and this is an exercise we'll do on the program, is if I said to you, please describe to me who you are and how you come across, could you answer that off the top of your head, or do you go blank? Now, if you go blank, I'm not saying that's a problem, but if you are struggling to engage people naturally, it might be useful for you to actually go, well, what are the ways? Who am I? And what are some of the ways that I show up? So I know that I can be a little bit zany. In fact, someone said to me yesterday, Scott, Steve, keep being weird. I can be a little bit weird, but I've learned to lean into that, not because I'm weird like that, but because it gives energy to others. It helps others. Something else about me is I like film, I like music, I like pop culture. So I will use that in things that I do. I like metaphors, I like frameworks, right? I'm giving you a framework right now. That's part of me. Others are not going to be like that, right? The second thing you then need to do is apply simple methods for interacting. Get your methods, decide how your field is going to interact. Um, I do think this is actually a really, really underrated but powerful thing is when you know how to ask for something, you can just do it the same way every time. And it relieves so much cognitive and emotional load off of you. And it's the same for how do you disagree? How do you contribute? How do you run a meeting, right? There's loads of things that improve our field by us just having a method that we can decide works for us. And then finally, orbit, right? It's establish our habits of connection. Let's look at one of the frameworks that we would look at, a way of understanding this that we're going to do in the program. And this is something called the stereotypical content model. Really, really cool. And it basically says that when people are evaluating someone else, they're doing it along two axes. One is that person warm? What's their warmth? And warmth is them assessing, will that person harm me? If you're warm and friendly and kind and you greet people and so forth, they will assume that you are warm. Therefore, they will assume that you are not going to harm them. Therefore, they assume positive intent about you. That's the thing. And also, they kind of, that's kind of when someone has a more relational focus. And we like these people, certainly. But there's also the other side, right, which is competence, which is not will you harm me? This is can you protect me? Bearing in mind that humans are ultimately these kind of tribal creatures, right? How will you protect me? If I'm in the tribe with you, will you protect me? And this isn't about intent. This is about capacity or capability. And this is around task focus. Do you have the task? Now, when someone is high in warmth and high in competence, well, these are the best people. There was a guy at school that I knew. He was so popular because everyone just liked him because he was genuinely nice and he was genuinely competent. You then get those people that are high warmth, but let's say they're low competence, right? We know those people. I'm thinking of them right now, right? Where we like them, but we don't perhaps admire them. So we feel safe, but we don't admire them. Maybe you're that person. Maybe you feel like I don't get respect. So then The thing is, how do you increase the way that you display your competence? Now, I'm not asking you to not be you. Let me get this right. I'm not asking you to not be you. But I am saying you do have competence. Part of your mass will be competence. How do we let that mass work? And that then becomes a question, doesn't it? It's how does that mass come across? How might we work with that? How might we ensure that your mass comes out? So here's something for me is I am not someone that brags about the work that I do. I don't talk about stuff and exaggerate things. But what I will do is I will say when I'm working with people or I meet people that I consult for the UN, which is a true statement. And it's something I'm really proud of and pursued with great intention in my life. And the moment I say that, immediately people attribute a competence to me, don't they? Um, and if so, and it's funny because then when you're working in the UN, they don't think it's of course impressive at all. So then I might say, yes, I worked with Boeing recently, and then the UN people go, wow, that's amazing. So it never works, perhaps always, but that's a simple way that I can display competence. Now, it might be that you don't need to display competence. Someone I know recently, they were saying they met someone. This person came across very unassuming, and as they've got to know them, they've respected them more. Because maybe we don't need to show that right away. But I suspect that many of us, our issue actually might be that warmth isn't the issue. It's how do we display our competence. So that's something that we will be looking at on the program. Not so much in mass, although in mass we will understand your competence. It's then in the field, how do we allow your competence, or how do we shape the way that you communicate that? So 3 parts here: mass, field, and orbit. Let's go into the journey. And look, you can screenshot this and use this without joining the program, but this is what we're going to do in the program. Is in mass, we're first of all going to recognize that gravity is an option. You don't need to use atomic energy. You don't need to be the person high on charisma, high on energy. You can be you, and that is an option. Secondly, we're going to understand your mass through exercises. I've got some great exercises that we do to understand your mass, understand who you are. Bearing in mind that your mass is also how you think. Your mass is how you imagine yourself. So one great question I like to ask is, who would you be in a movie? What film character would you be? And that begins to tell you stuff about yourself, and it begins to tell you how maybe you might show up. Another exercise that we do is you will have to ask people, and I've done this myself, what is it that I do that engages you? And you'll be fascinated to hear what people like about you. Once we understand your mass, we can then clarify your engagement style, right? We can kind of decide some of how you might come across. Then we're going to go to field, right? That's the second week. So week 1 is mass. Week 2, all right, is field. This is what we're going to do. We're going to design your conversational patterns for warmth and competence. So we're going to design the way that you conversationally come across as both warm and competent, bearing in mind it will be different for everyone. This is very profound, right? Can you imagine having a conversational pattern lined up that you are able to just speak and it rolls off your tongue that conveys both warmth and competence? Boom. What a joy. In a way that, again, is authentic to you. Because here's what we do, right? This is the mistake we make, is we see someone else do it and we think, oh, I must emulate that. So for instance, I can't stand the people on LinkedIn who do these posts that act like they are the fount of all wisdom. It really gets under my skin. So I need to find, how do I do a post that conveys my warmth and competence in a way that can help others, but again, is authentic to me, right? Next, we're going to identify your engagement fears, which maybe you don't want to do, but damn it, we need to do that, don't we? Need to understand what you're afraid of and why, and we need to understand it, not just know it. We will look at how we activate group engagement. This was critical. When it comes to having a field, how do we create a field? I'll tell you something straight away. You do not need to be the one creating all the energy, all right? Gravity is created by bodies of energy, right? Working together, I think, at least. And so that's something. And then we will also learn phrases for asking, contributing, disagreeing. I think one of the reasons why people fear some people is they don't know what to say if that person does criticize them. Knowing what you would say, having the line ready actually alleviates you. I call it a safety net. You just know what you're going to fall back on. So it's relaxing. Then finally, in week 3, we're going to look at orbit, right? We will establish your engagement practice, your habit of doing things so that you are doing, reviewing, improving without you needing to therefore be perfect. And as a terrible perfectionist, I know this one is important. Next, we're gonna look at implementing a routine for building relationships, which means understanding who do you need to build relationships with, right? So I am proactively building relationships with leads for my business. I also maintain relationships because I just like people. That's a key thing. And there are ways that I do it, right? I've got a system for staying in touch with everybody once a year. And then finally, we're going to look at how do you own being orbited, which at the very least is not saying things like, oh, it was nothing. Yeah. Anyway, we won't go into that. So here we go. You can take a screenshot of this. Here's the journey, right? For mass, field, and orbit. Now you can do this yourself. You will struggle to do it by yourself though, because we do these things with others. We need others to reflect on us. We understand ourselves through others. It's just engagement is the way as well as the end. So here it is, right? Here is the pitch for you is the Personal Engagement Power Program. What a mouthful. It's a 3-week program to unlock your natural engagement power for how you engage peers, stakeholders, clients, and audiences, right? That's what we're going to be doing. I invite you to join the next group. Right, it starts next Wednesday, the 8th of July. We're going to apply this method, right, over 3 90-minute sessions. Each session is 90 minutes. We have one session a week for 3 weeks, 90 minutes each. And you're going to put it into practice with the support of the group. And look, here it is, right? This is exactly it, right? Like we said, week 1, we're going to look at your mass. We're going to discover your mass. Then you have to go away and do exercises, which is why the WhatsApp group is important. Tell us how you're getting on. Week 2, we're going to look at refining your field, right? And again, you go away, you apply. And then finally, we're going to look at establishing your orbit. You also get a one-on-one with me anytime during it and afterwards, if that's something that would help you. Because often a bit of one-on-one time is good to go into some things that maybe you didn't feel like you could go into in the group. So finally, what's the cost? The program is £560, which translates into, what's that? $700, 650 euros. We start next Wednesday, the 8th of July, 2026. There is a webinar offer. If you use this code webinar as a result of being on this webinar, then you get a rate of 440, which, if you divide that by, 4, because you kind of get 3 sessions plus one with me, that's £110 per 90-minute session, which is pretty, that's it's very good value. Very, very good value, isn't it? I think it's a well worth it investment. If you are in the UN, and many people watching this are in the UN, and people who joined us are in the UN, there is a 50% rate. So it takes this down to £280 for you. And that's really important for me because I love my work with the UN. They're going through a hard time right now with the UN 80. And so this is my way of being able to provide some kind of assistance. Right. That's half an hour on this. I want to thank you for taking the time to watch this. I hope to see you on the program. Reach out to me with any questions. And even, if you come along, great. If you don't, I wish you the best of luck all the same. Be you, right? Be you. I think that's the best all of us can do.